So being named in it was dangerous.
Yes,
You were pretty much manufacturing what you wanted to see.
nature did not hand it to me, so I had to make it myself.
People now turn those pages into a tank, a helicopter, even a parachute. How much of that machinery existed beyond the drawing?
A drawing of armor, flight, or descent is not yet a tank.
Today, it is probably the most famous painting in the world, Mona Lisa. Why do you think it became so famous?
I painted the woman before me. They decided what the painting would become.
In 1911, the Mona Lisa was stolen from the Louvre, and the story made headlines around the world.
To think that a theft could make a painting more famous than the work itself.
The Battle of Anghiati. What did that painting demand from you?
Violence on a civic scale.
What do you think that people most misunderstand about you?
I think that they choose between two simple figures: the effortless universal genius and
Who makes the past? Who lights the fire? The minds don't fade, they only rise higher.
I'm Atlas Ingram, and this is Immortal Minds, the show where history's greatest thinkers sit down for the conversations they never got to have. This is Season 1. Today, Leonardo da Vinci, a painter and investigator who kept looking beneath appearances even when the work before him still needed an ending. Welcome, Leonardo da Vinci.
Thank you, Atlas.
There was a time when that name did not carry so much weight. It was just Vinci in 1452. Hills, watercourses, cultivated ground, workshops, an extended family household. What did that world look like?
Straight from the start, I see. My grandfather noted the birth of a child to Ser Piero, a notary, and a woman named Caterina. They were not married, but the Da Vinci family acknowledged me. My position was irregular, yes, but I was neither concealed nor cast out of the household.
Acknowledged, but still irregular. What did that close off?
The ordinary route into my father's profession, for one. A notary's training required the learned path and sustained work in Latin. I did not receive that schooling in Latin and Greek as a boy, but that is not the same as no education. I learned in the vernacular, reckoning, measurement, the handling of objects, the knowledge of people who could make or repair something. A page could teach me. So could a tool, a piece of cloth, or the course of water.
You keep coming back to water. What was it about the streams and mill channels around Vinci that held your attention?
Good question. At first, simply that the mills never stayed still. Rain changed them. A mill channel forced them into one course, and then they found another when they could. I watched the same way I watched animals or weather, to see what changed and what caused it. Much later, those small observations became larger questions.
Watching is one thing. What made it disciplined?
It was the hand that made the difference. A thing seen could be drawn, and the drawing exposed what I had missed. Measurement forced another correction. If the proportion was false, the page showed it.
Oh, so basically you could see your own mistake on the page.
Yes, exactly. Books mattered too, even when learned texts were difficult for me to reach. So did people who understood a material, a calculation, or a craft. I learned by watching someone work and letting the result correct me. That required access to people and places I could not find in Vinci alone.
Quick pause. This conversation never happened. The person on the other side of it died decades ago, and what you're hearing is a dramatization. But we haven't put words in anyone's mouth. Everything they say comes from the record, their letters, their papers, what people actually wrote down at the time. Our team spends hours in that material before a single line gets written. So, yes, the conversation is invented. We'd never pretend otherwise. But what's in it? That's not invented. None of it. If it's been worth your time, the thing that actually helps is following the show, wherever you're listening. That's the whole ask. It's what lets us keep bringing back the people you actually want to hear. And tell us who you want next. We're listening. Now, let's get back to it. So, if Vinci gave you things to observe, where did you find the people and materials that could take that further?
Through my family's connections, and then Florence. I couldn't inherit the notarial route, but I was not cut off from those networks. Ser Piero's connections opened a city of skilled work, patrons, books, and materials. I did not suddenly acquire the learned education I had missed. I entered another kind, built around people who could show what they knew in practice.
That other education begins in Florence, where you ended up inside Verrocchio's workshop. What was different from learning on your own?
That nothing stayed an idea for long. A line became pigment on plaster, cloth over a body, a figure bearing weight, or metal that survived casting. If the preparation was poor, it ruined a surface. For example, false proportions disturbed the body. If your drawing could not guide another hand, it had failed. So if the object bent, cracked, or looked lifeless, talking about it would not fix it. Each failure was visible, and everyone in the room could see it. So thanks to that, the work had an order where the patron named the subject, money and materials were counted, and many hands carried a design into an object.
And what sort of place was the workshop?
When I entered Verrocchio's bottega, painting stood beside sculpture, metalwork, casting, architectural ornament, technical design, and festival construction. It was all in one. A design might begin on paper, pass into clay or wax, and end in pigment, bronze, timber, cloth, or a festival machine. You learned to follow it through all those changes. I could not become a notary.
You had several trades working beside one another. What did that do to the way you looked at a problem?
It made looking useful. In Vinci, I could watch water cut a bank or an animal carry its weight. In Florence, a drawing or object had to carry that observation to other makers and serve the work that had been ordered.
Give me the workbench version. What did the materials teach you?
Pigment changed with its ground, its binding medium, and the light. Drapery revealed the body by falling under gravity. Sculpture demanded balance from every side. Casting was less forgiving still. Before the metal moved, you had to imagine heat, channels, shrinkage, weight, and the order of every step.
So, when a design reached the workshop floor, who was actually the one making it?
First of all, Verrocchio. Then fellow pupils, assistants, metal workers, carpenters, suppliers, and the patrons who set the terms. Each held part of what a finished object required. Festival devices made that plain. Something had to open, turn, or descend at the proper moment. Structure, motion, light, and timing had to meet. A finished work might bear one master's name, but several hands could have prepared and executed it. My own responsibility grew, but I never stopped depending on that exchange.
When does that growing responsibility become visible in the record?
Two moments stand out. In 1472, I was admitted to the Painters' Confraternity of St. Luke, though I continued within Verrocchio's orbit. On August 5, 1473, I dated a landscape drawing, my earliest securely dated surviving drawing. The sheet follows distance through atmosphere. Rock, valley, cultivated ground, and water shape the image. It tests what the eye can organize on a surface.
And the famous angel in the baptism of Christ, did it really make Verrocchio abandon painting?
No. That is Vasari's later story, and it tells us something about how my early reputation was remembered. The object tells a collaborative history. Several hands contributed as the painting developed, and my part is generally recognized in an angel and parts of the landscape. There is no secure reason to turn that into my master's surrender. The Annunciation and the portrait of Ginevra de' Benci show development and redirected attention, but they emerged from the same world of shared materials, conventions, and judgment.
That is the record of a young painter emerging. In 1476, another record put your name in danger. What does it actually establish?
Only that an anonymous accusation alleged sexual acts involving Jacopo Saltarelli and me, and the proceedings ended without conviction. Beyond that, I cannot tell you. It does not establish the alleged acts, imprisonment, or a settled account of my private relationships. Later certainty cannot be extracted from an unresolved proceeding.
So being named in it was dangerous.
Yes.
Okay, then tell me this. 3 years later, you drew the executed Bernardo Bandini Baroncelli. What did you choose to put on the page?
Bandini had been hanged from the Bargello for his part in the Pazzi conspiracy. I drew the body's weight and posture, the fall of the garments, a tan-colored cap, and a black satin doublet. The cloth was not separate from the body. Its pull and folds showed where the weight settled. What mattered on the page was what I could see, a body and its clothing under gravity.
By then, what changed when an entire commission, not one workshop contribution, became yours?
In 1478, I received an altarpiece commission for a chapel in the Palazzo della Signoria, and I did not deliver it. When the whole work was mine, so were the subject, materials, payment and time promised to the patron. Completed or substantially completed early paintings survive. I did finish work. But here, preparation enlarged the problem until delivery failed.
The adoration of the Magi makes that harder to dismiss as a single failure.
It does. The monks of San Donato a Scopeto commissioned it in 1481. A fixed devotional scene became an arrangement of circling bodies, gestures, architecture, animals, and different states of attention. Each relation altered another, and the underdrawing became extraordinarily developed. Then I left the panel unfinished. Saint Jerome preserves intense investigation without closure too. In both cases, work was done, and work promised did not arrive.
Because the problem kept growing sounds very different from the patron's side of the contract.
Of course it does. A patron waiting for an altar cannot be paid with that explanation. Materials had been committed, and there were expectations, obviously, from collaborators and institutions, since an unfinished panel could not perform its intended purpose.
Okay, then was that the reason why you left for Milan?
Yes, though not the whole of it. Around 82 or 83, I did leave Florence. The workshops had trained me, but the identity available there remained centered on the painter. I wanted a court where design, mechanics, spectacle, and image-making could belong to a broader service. Painting remained part of that service, but it would no longer define the whole of it. So I left as a recognized painter, carrying the workshop's method with me. And the unfinished project remained behind.
You came to Milan as a Florentine painter, but in your draft to Ludovico Sforza, who was the Duke of Milan at that time, painting comes almost last. Why lead with warfare and engineering?
Because I was writing to a ruler. I led with bridges, fortifications, artillery, waterways, architecture, and devices for attack or defense. Painting, sculpture, and the equestrian monument came later. It was a proposal shaped around what Ludovico might need, not a list of machines already built.
People now turn those pages into a tank, a helicopter, even a parachute. How much of that machinery existed beyond the drawing?
To be honest, not as much as people imagine. A page could test a motion, preserve a mechanism, or persuade a patron. It did not prove that a full machine had been built, tried, or used. So some ideas went into models or practical work. Many remained on paper. A drawing of armor, flight, or descent is not yet a tank, a helicopter, or a parachute.
Let me get back to your arrival. Back then, the court did not see those as separate professions. What did they actually ask you to be there?
Several things, often together. A dynasty needed ceremonies, stage effects, portraits, monuments, buildings, water management, military advice, music, and images of authority. A question about motion could pass from a festival machine into water or a painted body. The court allowed that range. It paid, supplied materials, and decided what mattered. My own household grew with the work. Gian Giacomo Caprotti, whom I called Salai, entered it aged 10 in 1490 and remained with me for years. If the ruler's priorities changed, mine had to move with them.
Which meant that you gained room to move between fields, but you were still working for a patron. Where did that freedom first run into the limits of a contract?
With the Virgin of the Rocks. The 1483 contract named Ambrogio and Evangelista de Predis beside me, and set out materials, payments, and obligations. The dispute over payment and delivery lasted until 1508. While that continued, I was working on gesture, atmosphere, and the way the rock enclosed the figures. Those were not separate stories. The painting remained a collective commission, with money and duties attached to it.
You mentioned festival machinery. Where did anyone at court actually see those mechanisms working, rather than merely described?
At festivals, structures moved at the right instant, while light, costume, music, and machinery hid the labor. The audience knew whether the effect worked. Music belonged there too. People later said I arrived with a silver lyre shaped like a horse's skull. Memorable, but I would not build the scene around it.
You mean the Sforza horse?
Yes, that one went much further than just sketches. I studied horses while moving or at rest, measured them, revised the pose, and worked through the heat, channels, weight, and sequence of casting at that scale. Thanks to that, we were able to make a full-size clay model. The model showed the scale. It did not solve the casting. Bronze required metal, furnaces, skilled labor, stable patronage, and time. And any one of those could stop the work.
The model reached full scale, but the bronze still depended on knowledge and resources outside you. When the work exposed a gap, whom did you turn to?
Whoever knew the missing part. I noted an arithmetic master to ask about geometry, a bombardier about the walls of Ferrara, and questions for architects, physicians, and people who understood water. I searched for particular books and measurements others had taken. The notebooks are full of requests. Often I didn't have the answer, but I knew whom I needed to ask.
Can you show me what you mean by this?
Okay, for example, take the figure called Vitruvian Man. Vitruvius supplied claims about proportion, but the text could not settle how one body occupied both a circle and a square. Drawing made the shifts of the limbs and center visible. Francesco di Giorgio and other architects belonged to that conversation. Later, Luca Pacioli brought deeper mathematics, while I drew polyhedra for his work on proportion. The drawing was part of the thinking.
Then take that method into the Last Supper. You had to turn all those studies of gesture and movement into one fixed scene. What were you trying to catch on the wall?
One announcement moving through 13 bodies. Christ speaks of betrayal, and the stillness breaks. My notes show a hand leaving a glass, fingers turning, palms opening. One man speaking into another's ear, another reaching for bread and upsetting a vessel. A movement begins in one figure and draws an answer from the next. Recoil, question, accusation, disbelief. Change one hand or shoulder and the balance shifts around it.
Why?
Because otherwise I had a row of separate faces. One man's movement had to alter the space around another. A shoulder turns, a hand interrupts, a torso pulls away, and the next body answers. Anatomy made intention visible through those movements. The table keeps the figures together, but their gestures break the calm across it. That gives the still image a sequence.
So wet fresco would have forced you to commit before all those gestures were settled.
Yes, exactly. Each section had to be finished while the plaster still took pigment, because I wanted to reconsider a face or hand when another gesture changed, and I wanted softer tonal transitions. Working on a dry wall gave me time to return. For this painting, I chose that freedom.
So what was the cost that was tight to it?
The paint adhered badly and began deteriorating within decades. I understood what wet fresco required. I chose a different method because it served the revisions I wanted. I could go back to the image, but the wall held it poorly. The freedom helped while I worked. Afterwards, the surface began to fail.
So when the French took Milan in 1499, the court was collapsing around work that was already physically fragile. What happened to everything else?
The court that had sustained nearly 2 decades of work was gone. Ludovico fled and was captured. Patronage, property, access, and working relationships became unstable. Bronze intended for the horse had already gone to military need, so conquest ended the prospect of casting it. The clay model was reportedly used as a target and destroyed. The studies remained. But unfortunately, the state that could have made the monument did not.
Where did you go after that?
First, I went to Mantua. Isabella d'Este obtained a profile drawing and kept pressing me for a painting I did not deliver. Then Venice, where I advised on defensive problems during pressure from the Ottoman conflict. Neither became another settled Milan. I was moving between courts and governments, trying to find a use for the same abilities after the place that had held them together was gone.
Then, in 1501, Borgia names you architect and engineer general, and officials were ordered to open their fortresses to you. Have I got the year right?
It was actually a year later, 1502. His letter patent told officials to admit me to fortresses, provide assistance, and make people available. That let me survey walls, roads, rivers, approaches, and towns across Romagna. Observation made the measurements useful, but it would not have opened those places. Borgia's authority supplied that access.
You gave Borgia a view no traveler could hold from the street. Who was that clarity really for?
It truly was mainly for Borgia himself. The map gathers streets, walls, blocks, and surrounding terrain into a measurable plan, instead of a traveler's sequence of turns. It required careful survey, but the result was practical. Movement, defense, access, and control became easier to judge. In Borgia's service, making the city more legible also extended the ruler's reach.
And after all of that, you ended up returning back to Florence, where you turned that same attention from the landscape to a single person. Today, it is probably the most famous painting in the world, Mona Lisa. But back then, in 1503, it was supposed to be just a painting of Lisa del Giocondo. So why did the picture stay with you? And why do you think it became so famous?
At first, it was simply a portrait, but I was never satisfied with simply recording what was in front of me. I kept looking at the face, the expression, the light, the landscape behind her, and each time I returned to it, I saw something I could change. As for why it became famous, that belongs more to the people who came after me. I painted the woman before me. They decided what the painting would become.
I actually have something here you might find surprising. Most of the fame surrounding this painting came centuries after you. In 1911, the Mona Lisa was stolen from the Louvre, and the story made headlines around the world. When she was finally recovered, she had become something much bigger than a painting. She had become a global celebrity. Today, she is arguably the most recognizable painting in the world.
To think that a theft could make a painting more famous than the work itself, that is strange. It makes me wonder what people are truly looking at when they look at art. Is it the hand that made it? The beauty of the work? Or simply the story that grows around it? Perhaps fame tells us less about the painting than it does about the people who choose to admire it.
And perhaps that's the strange thing about art. The artist creates it, but eventually the audience decides what it means. Back in Florence, you faced a very different kind of challenge. The Battle of Anghiari, a huge public commission. What did that painting demand from you?
Violence on a civic scale. Men and horses compress into fear, strain, twisting, biting, and struggle. Michelangelo was commissioned for the opposite wall. So there was public competition without the need for an invented private feud. My wall remained unfinished, and another material experiment failed. Parts of the design were copied later. That is not an intact painting hidden behind Vasari's wall.
And shortly after that, your father died.
Yes. In July 4th, I wrote the hour twice among notes on geometry and water, and I gave his age as 80, apparently incorrectly. I marked his death. The page gives the hour. It cannot tell you everything that passed between father and son.
His death did not end the old legal distinction around your birth. What changed with your half-brothers afterward?
Family recognition and legal entitlement were different things. My legitimate half-brothers held another position in inheritance law, and conflict followed over my father's estate, and later over property connected with my uncle Francesco. Reputation did not remove the conditions of my birth. The law that had closed the notarial profession to me still shaped what I could claim as an adult.
By 1506, Florence was claiming the battle, and the French were claiming your service in Milan. Who had the stronger hold on your time?
Neither accepted the other's claim. Florence pointed to the unfinished Battle of Anghiari. Charles d'Amboise, the French governor in Milan, invited me north, and French protection helped me obtain extensions from Florence. Two governments valued my work while disputing who could command it. In 1506, I returned to Milan under French protection.
Back in Milan, French protection loosened Florence's claim on your time. What were you allowed to do?
It gave me room for painting, water, optics, geometry, urban systems, and anatomy, without tying every question to a civic commission. In 1508, settlement of the Virgin of the Rocks closed a contract begun 25 years earlier. I had time and access again, but still no finished books for those investigations.
Around 1508, you were back in Florence, though, at the Hospital of Santa Maria Nuova. Why?
My curiosity brought me there. An old man in the ward. They said he was more than 100 years old. I talked with him. A short while after, he died. Quietly. No struggle in it at all. I wanted to know why life ends that way. So I opened him.
You'd spoken with him, and then you opened him. Surgically.
Yes. He died without pain, and I wanted that cause in my hands, not in a book. A vessel feeding the heart, narrowed almost shut. The liver altered other vessels with it. I could see every one of them far more clearly than I could explain them.
You keep saying you could see it. Was there something you couldn't?
Unfortunately also, yes. The chambers inside the brain. Soft tissue. Cut into it and it collapses. And the space you're after is the very thing you destroy by looking. So I stopped looking. I made it something I could hold. Molten wax, driven into the cavities, left to set. Then I cut everything else away. What stayed in my hand was the space itself.
Let me get this straight. You were pretty much manufacturing what you wanted to see.
Nature did not hand it to me, so I had to make it myself.
And on the page? Because a body is round, but paper isn't. What was your process for that?
I turned it, sectioned it, layered it, drew it as though it were glass. Bones separated into the pieces that do the work, and muscles lifted away and set back. One view of the outside will never account for what's under it.
That sounds like the painter's problem carried beneath the skin. Where did the two practices meet?
Painting asks how a surface can convey volume, movement, and a structure causing an appearance. Anatomy tested that through cutting and comparison. A hand or shoulder needed several directions and depths before its movement made sense. The drawing came after the dissection, but it also let me compare one view with another.
That work needed bodies, medical learning, and permission. Who made that possible?
It was Marcantonio della Torre. In winter of 1510 to 1511 in Pavia, his anatomical learning and institutional access joined my visual method. We concentrated on human dissection and examined the heart, valves, vessels, brain, fetus, bones, and muscles. The sheets depended on more than my eye. They required bodies, inherited theory, medical knowledge, practical help, and institutional access.
How much did observation correct what the inherited theory had taught you?
Some of it. I studied the heart as a pump and examined chambers, valves, and vortices in moving fluid. I drew bones and muscles accurately from several directions, yet I retained Galenic ideas, including passages that were not there, and I did not reach the later account of circulation. Animal evidence also misled me. One fetal drawing transfers bovine placental structures into the human body. Sometimes expectation shaped what I thought I saw.
What still governed whether you could dissect a human body at all?
Hospitals, physicians, available corpses, season, permission, and trusted relationships. Human dissection was not under a universal church prohibition. My method was visual and empirical, but it remained Renaissance natural philosophy. I might correct inherited authority in one place and remain inside it elsewhere. Looking directly did not free me from my century.
With observations that strong, Why did the anatomical book never reach physicians?
Della Torre died in 1511. Political disruption returned, and every explanation demanded another view or an earlier demonstration. I never brought the material into a form that could be edited, printed, copied, and taught. Exact drawings could still remain unavailable to medicine in my lifetime. I investigated the body without completing the means by which others could use the work.
Then Rome. Your reputation was enormous, but the work narrowed. What did you find there?
I went under Giuliano de' Medici's protection in 1513 and lived at the Vatican Belvedere. Raphael and Michelangelo held the central papal commissions. I continued geometry, optics, mirrors, water, mechanics, and anatomy. Complaints at Santo Spirito then cost me access to dissection. I returned to drawings and notes, but there were no bodies to open there.
After Giuliano died in 1516, what made Francis I's offer different that it made sense for you?
I received status, income, counsel with the king, and room for paintings and papers. I could advise without waiting for a public commission. Francesco Melzi, my pupil and closest assistant, came with me and helped tend the papers and the work. I designed a royal complex at Romorantin, including architecture and water management, but it was not built. Similarities prompted claims about Chambord.
When Antonio de Beatis visited in October 1517, what work still surrounded you?
Major paintings, a Florentine lady, St. John and St. Anne, alongside anatomical drawings and many vernacular manuscripts. De Beatis saw that my right hand was impaired, and that I could no longer paint with my former delicacy. I could still draw with my left, and direct work through assistants. The papers looked like work that might still be ordered and published.
Why were you still returning to water?
Because it remained unsolved. The deluge drawings continue the study of fluid movement, erosion, atmosphere, and transformation, with water, cloud, rock, and force compressed across the page. Their violence is visible, but it is not a confession of despair or a vision of my death. I was still pursuing an old problem.
By April 1519, who would carry the work after you? What did your will decide?
On April 23rd, I gave Melzi my books, instruments, drawings, and artistic materials. Salai and Battista de Villanis received interests in Milanese property. Maturina received a fur-lined black cloak and 2 ducats. 400 scudi at Santa Maria Nuova went to my half-brothers. I also ordered masses, candles, alms, and 60 poor men carrying tapers for the funeral.
9 days later, on May 2nd, 1519, you died at Clue, aged 67. Francis I holding you belongs to later storytelling. You were buried at St. Florentine. After your death, Melzi preserved and organized the papers, but did not complete publication. Later inheritance and sale scattered them. Collectors cut, mounted, and rearranged the sheets. A shortened treatise on painting appeared in 1651. What was lost?
Much of the order was lost, and with it, the chance for the work to act in its own time. Melzi's care prevented disappearance, but preservation did not create a finished book or people able to teach from it. Once the sheets were divided, readers met fragments. The writings on painting traveled further than the anatomy, but even that transmission was partial.
The paintings remained visible enough to enter practice. What could inaccessible pages influence?
Very little without a route to other people. A later machine may resemble one of my drawings, or a discovery may resemble an anatomical observation, but resemblance is not descent. Influence requires circulation, teaching, or publication. The paintings had some of those roots. Much of the anatomy and natural inquiry did not become widely visible until centuries later.
That delayed recovery helped create the universal genius. The achievements were real, but your contemporaries knew the painter, court practitioner, advisor, and investigator in parts. They never received one published system. Later centuries gathered the fragments into a range that your own world had not seen whole. I would like to end it today with a few questions not about your life, but specifically about you. What do you think that people most misunderstand about you?
I think that they choose between two simple figures: the effortless universal genius and the distracted man who finished nothing. Neither explains how the work was formed. I learned through family access, practical education, Verrocchio's workshop, skilled makers, books, mathematicians, physicians, patrons, and rulers. Other people and institutions supplied materials, correction, opportunity, and use.
Then the solitary genius story falls away. It still leaves all the work you did not finish.
Some commitments failed as inquiry expanded. Others through experimental materials, broken contracts, war, mobility, or lost access. Sometimes I failed to deliver when I should have.
But work left undone was not your whole life.
Yes, a lot of paintings were completed, entered practice, and changed how artists handled gesture, atmosphere, movement, and attention. My range came from carrying observation between kinds of work, not from knowing everything beforehand. I depended on workshops, courts, books, materials, and skilled people, and remained limited by my century.
What did the world gain from your work? And what did it cost?
I believe that paintings gave form to light, movement, atmosphere, and inward attention. People could see them, copy them, and carry their methods forward. The anatomical and mechanical pages preserved different gaze, but most did not circulate widely in my lifetime. Their historical effect came later and was more limited.
Right. So the cost was not yours alone to bear.
Yes, partially. Patrons waited for altarpieces and public works that never arrived. Collaborators and institutions remained caught in disputes and unfinished obligations. Materials were bought, time committed, and intended uses left unmet. An expanding investigation might produce value elsewhere, but it did not settle the original promise or its consequences.
So in the end, some costs stayed in the works themselves, and in ideas that could not reach the people who might use them.
For example, The Last Supper gained subtlety from a method that left its surface fragile. War ended the conditions needed for the Sforza monument. Anatomy remained outside medicine because I did not finish the book, and Melzi preserved papers later divided. Reopening one problem also took time from another obligation.
What does your complete life show a young, unknown observer learning outside formal institutions about what must be finished, shared, or entrusted to others before insight can matter?
My route began outside the conventional learned profession, but never outside institutions or other people. The workshop made observation answer to materials, collaborators, patrons, and use. Drawing could expose hidden structure, and measurement could correct the eye. Neither ensured anyone else would receive the result. Knowledge needed forms and relationships, able to carry it further.
The workshop gave curiosity a social form. Later, the work grew past what one person could carry alone.
Yes, and that required judgment. Some inquiries could remain open. A promised painting could not. I had to decide which observation needed another test, which object had to be delivered, which pages required organization, and which work belonged in another person's care. More questions did not give me more time or hands.
Then there are the papers. Melzi kept them safe, but he could not finish the work.
Melzi saved much that might have vanished, but he inherited more than one man could put into books. After the sheets were dispersed, readers received fragments. A question may remain open, but hidden pages teach no one. The work had to be ordered, copied, printed, or left among several hands able to carry it further.
Your work carried observation from one field into another. Your papers show that discovery, completion, preservation, and transmission are different achievements. Leonardo da Vinci, thank you.
Thank you, Atlas. A whole life compressed into one conversation, and I suspect people will still go to the Louvre and ask only about the smile or the eyes.
This has been Episode 7 of Immortal Minds. I'm Atlas Ingram. Follow or subscribe for more impossible conversations.